Um, I'll confess, I'm a big believer in miracles. I don't know if everybody else is a believer in miracles, but I'm a big believer in miracles. But I wanted to share with you someone who has an opposing viewpoint. Richard Dawkins, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a philosopher. He was British. He was educated at Oxford and teaches at Oxford. He's very prolific, but he's an avowed atheist. And he wrote something called The God Delusion. And he believes that there's no such thing as God and he doesn't exist, and that religious faith is a delusion. So it's interesting that he says that God is almost certainly doesn't exist. I don't know if he says that because he can't prove that God exists, or maybe he's trying to hedge his bets. Anyway, I want to do my screen share and share something with you. There we go. Can I have a volunteer, please, to read the Richard Dawkins source? You just unmute yourself.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion. I suspect that miracles provide the strongest reason many believers have for their faith. And miracles, by definition, violate the principles of science. There are athletes who believe God helps them win against opponents who would seem, on the face of it, no less worthy of his favoritism. There are motorists who believe God saves them a parking space, thereby presumably depriving somebody else. This style of theism is embarrassingly popular. A miracle-free religion would not be recognized by most practicing theists in the pew or on the prayer mat. It would indeed be a grave disappointment to them.
Right. So Richard Dawkins is saying that if you're religious, if you subscribe to any religion, you have to believe in miracles, because he, of course, doesn't believe in miracles. But I thought an interesting counter to what he says. I think also he has sort of like a common and vulgar understanding of what miracles are. I don't think he understands what miracles are. We'll get into that. As opposed to Albert Einstein, who wrote that there are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle, and the other is though everything is a miracle, which I thought was really a beautiful way. At least Richard Dawkins doesn't believe that there could be the possibility of miracles. It's interesting because Albert Einstein was invited in 1952 to become the president of Israel, a little miracle state. The second president after the death of Chaim Weizmann, Abba Eban was the one who sent him a letter and said, don't worry about it. It's only, you can still do all your other work. It's only the presidency. It's just the presidency. But he obviously turned them down. He turned them down because he said he cited old age. He was 73 at the time, inexperience, and insufficient people skills. I guess he thought that was a reason that he couldn't be president. I won't say the clause that's hanging. So my opening question about miracles is are miracles a matter of perspective, or is the possibility of perspective itself a miracle, right? I mean, what would it look like to live your life as if everything were a miracle? Okay, I brought in the Richard Dawkins, but I'm not going there because, like I said, I confess from up front that I'm a believer in miracles. So what's the first thing on your mind when you wake up in the morning? So the rabbis teach us, and which is something that I do, the first thing I do is I say Moda Ani, okay? It's a gender specific language. Men say Moda Ani. Moda Ani means thankful I am. We don't even say I'm thankful. We say thankful. The first word out of my mouth in the morning is thankful I am to God, and for the miracle of waking up, actually for the miracle of two eyes that open every morning and that can see, right? Not everybody has that miracle. Not everybody's able to see. So there are miracles all around us all the time. And every day when we pray, we say the words in the Amidah, we say Modim Anachnu Lach. We are thankful to you, God. We give thanks to you. And on Hanukkah, we add Al Hanisim to our Modim prayer. And we also add it to the Birkat HaMazon. The Al Hanisim means for the miracles. By adding Al Hanisim to the Modim prayer, I realized I forgot to record. Here we go. Okay. by adding it to the Modim prayer, we are saying how thankful we are for the miracles. So I wanted us to take a look for 1 second, 1 minute. Let's look at the Al Hanisim prayer, the Modim and the Al Hanisim prayer. So I'm going to need a volunteer, please, to read the Modim prayer. Can I have a volunteer to read Modim and Nachmulach in the English?
I'll do it.
Thank you, Louis.
We proclaim that you are Hashem, our God and God of our ancestors, throughout all time. You are the rock of our lives, the shield of our salvation in every generation. We thank you and praise you for our lives that are in your charge, for your miracles that daily attend us, and for your wonders and gifts that accompany us every morning and noon. You are good, your mercy everlasting. You are compassionate, your kindness never ending. We have always placed our hope in you.
Right. So that's the Modim, which we're thanking God. So on Hanukkah, when we add Al Hanisim, we go right into, on the next page, into saying the Al Hanisim for Hanukkah. The first part of it is, and for the miracles and for the wonders and for the mighty deeds and for the salvations and for the victories that you wrought for our ancestors in their days and in this day. That's the part that we read on Hanukkah, and we also read that on Purim, because we say Al Hanisim. And then we come to the specific. Can someone read from In the Days of Mattathias?
I'll read that, Sharon.
Thanks, Arn.
Okay.
The days of Mattathias, son of Yochanan, the high priest, the Hasmonean and his sons, when the evil kingdom of Greece stood against your people Israel in order to make them Torah and violate your laws, you in your enormous mercy stood up need,
You're
held their cause, and you, the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, and the degenerates into the hands of those who cling to your Torah. And you made for yourself a great and holy name in your world, and performed a great salvation and miracle for your people Israel, as you do today. And afterwards your children came to the Holy of Holies in your house, and they cleansed your palace and purified your temple, and they kindled the lights in the courtyard of your sanctuary, and they established these 8 days of Hanukkah to give thanks and praise to your great name.
Thank you. So that's what we do. We are thanking God for the miracles on Hanukkah, and it's part. And the whole idea of the miracles is to be aware of them and to thank God for them. And that's why the rabbis placed the Al Hanisim prayer, the on the miracles prayer, as part of the Modim. So as an aside, but related to Al Hanisim, I wanted to share a thought from my colleague, friend, and former classmate, Rabbi Reish Weiss, who I know a lot of you might know from TBI because she was the rabbinic intern there when she was in rabbinical school. So she said that when she reads the Al Hanisim, she's struck by the binaries that it lists. The weak were spared from the mighty, the few from the many, the pure from the impure, and the righteous from the wicked, the upholders of Torah from evil. And the point that she made, which I really thought was interesting, she says that these binaries, especially in the world that we live in today, feel especially challenging because sometimes so many people today feel too comfortable dismissing entire groups of people just because they're other and because they're different. And sometimes particular actions or even words can trigger snap judgments that can create insurmountable rifts. I mean, we see this happen in our society all the time. So Raish, in her characteristic candor, says that she's fallen prey to this knee-jerk reaction, and that she's wondering in the current political situation, or just in our world today, maybe if we can see the Al Hanisim, not so much a simplistic us versus them mindset, but rather view it more with compassion and with nuance. And so when we say Al Hanisim, we can think about who is weak in our lives and who is mighty. And are you feeling weak now, or are you feeling mighty? Are you feeling strong, or are you feeling vulnerable? And if you're feeling strong, how can you help those who are weak overcome their vulnerabilities or work through their vulnerabilities? Because these categories are always in flux, right? The strong today could be the weak tomorrow, and vice versa. So this is such a beautiful and intentional way to look at Al Hanisim and to think about not only in the Hanukkah story, but even in the Torah. Like right now, we're reading the book of Genesis, and there are wonderful, wonderful stories in the book of Genesis. But you can see it's very clear that the Torah wants us to think that some people are the good people and some people are the bad people in the stories. And maybe those binaries are not so helpful. Maybe it's a matter of perspective, that not always the good guys versus the bad guys. So that was just sort of an aside. I mean, that could be a whole class in itself, but now we'll go back to our regularly scheduled program of the miracles. But I wanted to mention that because we do say, if you are saying the Al Hanisim prayer every day, to sort of think about that. So on Hanukkah, right, it's always taught that we celebrate two miracles, right? We have the military victory when the Maccabees won the war, and we have the spiritual victory, the spiritual miracle. The oil is lasting for 8 days. Just on the off chance that anybody doesn't know the Hanukkah story, in just 2 sentences, in 162 BCE, the Seleucid Greek empires told the Jews that they were not, the Jews were ruled by the Greeks, that you couldn't practice Judaism anymore, and they made them stop. And of course, the Jews didn't want to stop. So Mattathias and his 5 sons, one of whom was Judah, they formed the Maccabees, and they led a ragtag bunch of a revolt. And of course, the few won over the many. And the temple had been desecrated, and they only found enough oil to light the menorah for 1 day. And it takes 8 days to make the oil. So they lit the oil, and it lasted for 8 days. So, but the Al Hanisim prayer, which we just read, talks all about the miracle of the military victory. It doesn't even mention the spiritual miracle. And in contrast, the rabbis talk at length in the Talmud about the oil miracle. That's all that they're interested in is the oil miracle. So screen share here for 1 second. Back to the sources. Oh, I'm getting so good at this. I don't even knock people off anymore. I don't knock myself off. Okay, the miracle of the lights. Can I have a volunteer to read, please?
I'll read.
Good. I wanted to hear a female voice. It's nice to hear.
No, it's Peter.
Oh, Peter, I'm sorry. Thought it was. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. The miracle of the lights. The early rabbis deliberately emphasized the miracle of the menorah because they already realized what most of us could only appreciate in hindsight. Military triumphs are short-lived. Physical buildings do not stand forever, and even political independence can be an ephemeral condition. These things only last until the ascent of the next tyrannical empire. But the light of the menorah, speaking to the ideas of the mind and to the matters of the soul, the purest of oils, reminding us of the Jews' never-ending capacity for spiritual survival and regeneration. These things are eternal. The military victories of the Hasmoneans were soon forgotten. The sanctuary and Jerusalem were razed to the ground, and the Jewish people were scattered to the far ends of the earth. But the story of the pure oil and the lights that could not be extinguished lived on, carried by the Jewish people wherever they wandered. As Zechariah the prophet proclaimed in the vision of the pure temple menorah that we read in the Haftarah of Shabbat Hanukkah, not by power nor by strength, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts.
Thank you, Peter. So the Al Hanisim talks about the miracle victory, and we just saw how the rabbis in the Talmud emphasized the spiritual victory. That's the second miracle. So we're always taught about the 2 miracles, but I think there's a third miracle. Okay, it doesn't get talked about much, but I think it's just as important. So after the military victory, the Jews were looking for oil to light the menorah, and they only found a small amount, and they still decided that they were going to light the menorah. Okay. Now the menorah in the temple didn't look like our menorah now. The menorah in the temple has 6 candelabras and 1 in the middle, so for a total of 7 lights. The reason we have the 8th one is because we have the miracle of Hanukkah where the oil lasted for the 8 days. But the fact that the Jews had the fortitude and the resilience to light a little bit of oil, which they knew wasn't going to last, or which they thought wasn't going to last. They didn't know a miracle was coming. That's really the third miracle of Hanukkah. That's why the rabbis spend so much time talking about and debating about the Hanukkah in the Talmud. They talk about how to light the menorah, why we light the menorah, when we light the menorah, what can you light with, what can you do with the lights afterwards. There's a whole long chapter of what to do with Hanukkah in the Talmud, because the rabbis basically inherited the story of a military victory, right? Because the story of Hanukkah was in 165 BCE, and the rabbis are writing after the sort of in the 1st and 2nd century and afterward, so we're talking of a couple of 100 years. So they were presented with the military victory, and they found a way to reimagine it. They wanted to hold on to the past of the military victory, but they wanted to make it, bring it into the present, which was for them the present, by creating a lived Judaism. And that's sort of what, what rabbis today try to do. We try to take what happened long ago and make it relevant today. And that's what the rabbis were trying to do. I want to share my screen again. So we're going to read a source by Rabbi David Hartman. He's the founder of the Shalom Hartman Institute in Israel. He passed away, I don't know, not too long ago. Maybe I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I had the privilege of studying with Rabbi Hartman when I lived in Jerusalem. That same year when I looked out the window to see where the Romans were. Actually, I think it was even in the same classroom. So I studied with him. He taught philosophy, and he talks about the optimism and the resilience of the Israelites who were able to go ahead and light the light, even though they thought there wasn't going to be enough to last. Can someone read Rabbi David Hartman, please?
I'll read it, Sharyn. It's Rita.
Thanks, Rita.
The miracle of the first day was expressed in the community's willingness to light a small cruse of oil without reasonable assurance that their efforts would be sufficient to complete the rededication of the temple. The miracle of Jewish spiritual survival throughout history may best be described by our own people's strength to live without guarantees of success and to focus on how to begin a process without knowledge of how it would end.
Yeah, that ability to be able to start something and not know the end. So many times I've had to say to myself when I wanted to do something, I said, I don't have to write the whole book. I don't have to write the last chapter now. I just have to be able to do what I have to do now and to get through that. And that's what Rabbi Hartman was talking about, just being able to get through. And that's by lighting the candle that first night, lighting the menorah that first night. That's where the Maccabees were able to do. And imagine what it must have been like for the Maccabees at the end of the war. Remember, they were a family, as we read in the Al-Hanisim, they were the Kohanim, they were the priests. So their daily lives revolved around working in the temple and serving in the temple. So imagine what it was like for them to see the temple in ruins. The Greek army didn't just ruin the temple, they desecrated it. They sacrificed pigs, they spilled pig blood all over the altar. It was more than just wanting to destroy the building. They were trying to ruin the people. I'll share a story with you. When I was 2 years old, my family moved. We lived in Bayside and we moved to Glen Cove, and we belonged to Congregation Tifereth Israel. And I had my bat mitzvah there, and then we moved shortly after my bat mitzvah. So my parents were very involved in the shul, and not only were they shul goers, they were very involved, and my father was the president of the shul. And one night, my dad got a call that the synagogue, that the shul had been vandalized. And my father piled all of us into the car. We went to the shul. We went to see what was there. And to this day, I can remember that sight. We walked in, and the vandals wasn't just enough that they could ruin the synagogue. They really wanted to desecrate it. They took the Torah, one of the Torahs, from the chapel, and they unrolled the whole Torah on the floor. There was a long corridor past the shul offices and some of the religious school classrooms. The Torah was unrolled, and not enough to just put the Torah on the floor and unroll it. They took the fire extinguisher, and with the chemicals, they sprayed the Torah with the chemicals. And I can remember this so clear. I mean, I don't know. I was a little kid. I don't even think I was 10 years old, but I remember it so clearly. My father was ashen-faced. I remember seeing my mother cry. And I thought this was just our little shul and our little Winkel in Glen Cove when our synagogue was desecrated and the Torah was desecrated. So imagine how the Maccabees might have felt when seeing the Holy Temple, the place where everybody came to bring their sacrifices. That's how they worshiped God. And to see that desecrated with pig blood. I mean, I can, like, I remember this as a little girl. I don't know, my brother's on this. Arnie, do you remember that also? I don't see. So I remember this so clearly going to the shul that night. So then you have an idea of what the Maccabees must have felt when they witnessed the desecration. They had won the war, but in order to win the battle, the cost was very high. But still, they didn't hang their heads in defeat. They didn't surrender. They didn't say, oh, we're not going to light the menorah because we only have enough oil for one day. And who knows, I'm just wondering if Matityahu, if he echoed a philosophy that my father used to always say, may he rest in peace. He would say, don't borrow tomorrow's problems today. If you can fix today's problem, fix today's problem. You can light the menorah for one day, light the menorah for one day. We'll see what happens tomorrow. It'll work out. That was my father's philosophy. And I think the Maccabees had the same philosophy, let's light the oil. And I think that was probably, I know that the other miracles are big, but the ability to go on and to be resilient and to be able to just push forward when bad things happen, that's a miracle. And there's not one person who's with us today who hasn't gone through something difficult in their lives that they've had to push through, whether it was a tragedy or the loss of a loved one or whatever it was, and we push through. And that in itself is one of the greatest miracles that God gives us, is that inner strength to go on. So when we commemorate the Hanukkah miracles, okay, we say two blessings. On the first night, we say three blessings. So on the first night, we say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Hanukkah. Blessed are you, our God, who's given us your commandments and commanded us to light the Hanukkah candles. And the second blessing is she'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. We are blessing God because he did miracles for our ancestors in those days and in that time. We'll talk about this in 1 second. And on the first night, we also add the Shehecheyanu, right? Shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. God has kept us alive and brought us to this day. And I feel that this year, with all the fear and anxiety of what we've been living through for the past 9 months, the idea of saying Shehecheyanu and that God having kept us alive feels specifically and particularly poignant. At least it did for me. I'm sure it does for a lot of you as well. So the second bracha, She'asa Nisim, who made the miracles for our ancestors in those days at this time. So we say, Bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. Our classical bracha says that God did the miracles in those times at this time, meaning at this time of year. Okay, so they were done. That's why we're remembering it at this time of year, because it was done in Kislev, which is in the Hebrew month that we're in now. But the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah says that there's an alternate version of the bracha that goes Bayamim hahem uvizman hazeh. So that in those days and today, meaning that the miracle was done back then and the miracle is happening today. So there's a beautiful Hasidic take on this by the Kedushat Levi, that's Rabbi Yitzchak Levi of Berdichev, who lived in Poland in the 18th century. And he said that when a miracle is fixed in time, then the light of the holiness belongs to the mitzvah of that miracle. It's fixed into every generation, meaning that Hanukkah happened in 165 BCE, but the light from the Hanukkah miracle is fixed in time, that's constant. So that when we light the Hanukkah candles today, it is as if the miracle is happening today. We are illuminating the miracle by lighting the candles, the same miracle that happened over 2,000 years ago. It's sort of like when you think about a star that dies, yet we can see its light for many, many, many years later. So the star's not there anymore, but the light is still there, and we can see that light. So that's the same, that's the Hasidic take on Hanukkah, is that it happened such a long time ago. But when we light the Hanukkah candles, we bring the miracle of Hanukkah into our lights then and now. That's what's meant by Yamim Hahem Bazman Hazeh. The Kedushat Levi says that miracles are part of our world today because miracles were made to happen. Miracles are not only about suspending nature, miracles are part of our everyday life. And they've always been with us and they always will be with us. And that believing in them is the key to opening the gate of God's presence. So Hanukkah is about bringing the light out of darkness and miracles out of tragedy. It's interesting when you think about it, our eyes have the iris, which is the black part, and the cornea, which is the white part. But we only have our vision. We can only see because of the dark, right? If the light couldn't get into the dark part of our eye, we would not be able to see. So sometimes something good can come from something bad, or darkness can come from light, and sometimes blessing can come from tragedy. And I think that's part not only of the Hasidic teaching, but that's part of the teaching that we have for Hanukkah. The light out of the darkness, miracles out of the tragedy. And that's where the hope comes from. You know, last week in the Torah reading, we read the story about Joseph, who was thrown in the pit, right? His brothers were jealous of him because his father gave him a coat of many colors and he had all these dreams. The brothers weren't too happy with him, so they throw him in the pit. And then they wind up selling him into Egypt. And that's how we wind up becoming slaves in Egypt. Which actually is very interesting. And a thought when we were saying Kiddush last week, I thought that was a very interesting connection. When we say Kiddush every Friday night, we are remembering two things. We're remembering creation, the universal theme of creation, and we are remembering the particular theme of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of our freedom from slavery in Egypt. So the reason we were slaves in Egypt was because Joseph was sold by his brothers and wound up going to Egypt, and that's how we wound up in Egypt. So I thought that was very interesting last week. That Kiddush felt like it was very much connected to Hanukkah last week. So we read about Joseph being thrown into the pit, and not this week, but the week after, we'll read about when Joseph has reconnected with his father, with Jacob. So after Jacob dies, Joseph wants to go back to the pit that he was thrown into by his brothers. So there's a midrash that says, it's not in the Torah, it says this is a midrash. So the rabbis say that Joseph went back to the pit to see sort of what was, sort of the scene of the crime. And his brothers see him by the pit. They see him kneeling by the pit. And the brothers are imagining that he's getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And that they're afraid that there's going to be some retribution, that he maybe will kill them or in some other way, take revenge for what they've done. But the truth is, the Midrash tells us that they're terrified, but they don't realize that what Joseph's doing is Joseph wasn't angry at all. He was praying at the pit and he was thanking God for the miracle of having saved his life. I mean, Joseph, who went through really hard times, right? Sold from the pit. His brothers threw him in the pit, sold to the Ishmaelites, the Midianites, and then sold into Egypt. And then he was thrown into jail for allegedly seducing the wife of Potiphar. Just a whole bunch of things that didn't go his way. But in the end he was resilient and he came through everything. And so he went back to the pit, to the place where his life, where really Jewish history would have been very different if this hadn't happened. And he went back there to thank God for the miracle of God being there and being there for him. And it's interesting because, like Joseph in the pit, many of us may feel separated and isolated because of the pandemic during Hanukkah this year. Nobody, just like we didn't have our Thanksgiving celebrations, our Hanukkah celebrations this year are not like what they were in previous years. But the Hanukkah lights remind us that we're not alone, that we're supposed to light up our darkness, and that we're not only supposed to light up our darkness, we have to light up the darkness for others. We have to help others through their darkness. We have to help others see their light and have hope, say a blessing, and to support one another in what may very well wind up being a very long and dark and difficult winter for a lot of people, as we can't be with our loved ones. There's an interesting teaching from Rabbi Kerry Olitsky, share my screen again, where he talks about being where we should be the shamash. We should help other people, right? The shamash is the helper candle, and the shamash is the helper candle that helps us light all the other candles. So Rabbi Kerry Olitsky writes, when we celebrate the miracles in our lives, no matter how large or small they may be, we must also understand our responsibility to be a metaphorical shamash. With each day, the light of the menorah increases until all 9 candles, including the shamash, burn on the final night. The shamash reminds us how easy it is to light up the darkness. And just as the light of the shamash spreads to the other candles and quickly illuminates the night, we must also be the initial spark to illuminate the darkness, helping to inspire and bringing light to others. I wanted to ask you if there, when you think about miracles, and when you think about what miracles you have in your life or you've experienced in your life, or just in miracles in general. So I just wanted to open it up to ask if you could share what your thoughts on miracles. I love what Rabbi Olitsky said about the fact that we should be a shamash and we should help bring the light to other people. That's what we do when we're Tikkun Olam. That's what we do. We have when we help other people during the pandemic. Some people are shopping for us. Some people are doing other things for us. I know we pray for these people all the time. But I was wondering if there's any. I wanted to open it up. I will unmute, or you can unmute yourselves if anyone wanted to share something about their own miracles or their own perspective on Hanukkah or living through this time. I would welcome that.
I don't have something about living through this time right now, but when I was reading the offering of what you were going to teach today, I was thinking about miracles that I've seen in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And as a nurse, I look at things in terms of helping people, but I was also struck with 2 miracles in my career. And one was the birth of a child, the first I had ever seen. And I just thought, here's a woman with a big belly, and the next minute there's a baby screaming. And I thought that was the most beautiful miracle I had ever seen. And the other miracle that I saw was a man who was in a coma for a long time. And his mother would come every day and be with him, and we all took care of him. And one day he woke up and he left the hospital. And I look at those things as miracles. And today I think there's a miracle too in the vaccine that's been so speedily created to stop this pandemic. And I think that the people who did that should be commended for putting so much effort, and everybody who's working to bring this vaccine to people. It is a miracle that within 9 months of the pandemic that a vaccine occurred. So I think, in terms of this pandemic that's going on, that's the miracle that we see.
Thank you. I remember when I'm working in the hospital also, the things, the miracle of childbirth for sure is an amazing miracle. And the fact that when you think about, I remember years ago when I was working at Little Brown as a college textbook editor, I worked on a nursing book. And one of the books was about all the things that could possibly go wrong in pregnancy. And I thought, well, what a miracle it is when a healthy baby is born, because there are so many things that could possibly go wrong. And as far as the vaccine, I was thinking about the people, the scientists who are working on it. I think of those people as shamash, the people who are bringing some light into the world by helping it, God willing, helping us to be safe one day from the disease. Anyone else? Yes, Joan.
On a different vein, I thought what a miracle it was that I survived the Shoah, because just through the goodness of an uncle and the fact that I didn't go on the kinder transport and that I was saved with my family. And as a result, there's a whole family of my children and grandchildren and families that are the result of the miracle of being saved.
Thank God. Thank you for sharing that. When I was one of the interviewers for the Spielberg Survivors of the Shoah Foundation, and every time we would tape the survivors' testimony, and then at the end we always brought in their family, children, grandchildren. At that point, I don't think anybody had any great grandchildren, but it was children and grandchildren. And I always felt like it was one of those miracles, you know, the sort of like with the Maccabees, you know, the few over the many. I always loved seeing that. So thank you for sharing that, Joan, and thank you that you're here with us today. And you've got children and grandchildren who are lighting Hanukkah candles and bringing that miracle into their lives.
Right.
May I ask a question?
Certainly, Letty.
We always learned that years ago that Hanukkah was a minor holiday, but we say Hallel, we read the Torah every single day of Hanukkah. Why isn't it one of the Shlosh Regalim? Why isn't it considered a more important holiday, or is it now?
Well, you know, it's funny. It's a minor holiday on the calendar because it's not considered one of the three major festivals, right? Like Pesach and Shavuot and Sukkot. So those are the festivals that are mentioned in the Torah, which is what also gives them that status, because they're mentioned in the Torah. We don't read about Hanukkah in the Torah because it happened after that time. But I think that a lot of the themes of Hanukkah are very important. I mean, it's made into a bigger holiday now because of its proximity to Christmas. So the whole idea of the decorations and the gifts and everything, that's because of the society we live in. But even in Israel, where the miracle took place, it's a pretty big holiday. You know, there's all kinds of festivities that go on, especially in Jerusalem, which is, like I said, the site of where the miracle happened. So yes, I think that teaching that it's a minor holiday from the point of view that it's not one of the three major holidays is probably accurate. But the point is that I find that the values and the lessons to be learned from the Hanukkah holiday don't make it minor at all. So I appreciate your bringing that up, Letty.
I would like to go back to the business about these medical miracles. So I was listening to Hadar on Sunday night, or maybe it was on Thursday night. Anyway, the teaching was don't wait for a miracle. And I was at the doctor this very morning, and I was it was my dermatologist complaining about my dry skin. And he pointed out to me, after discussing what I'm supposed to do about it, is that in the past, life expectancy was 40 years old. So we need to think about the people who didn't wait for a miracle, who brought us all these advances to help us reach the age that we're at.
Is it possible that those are the miracles?
Yes, but the people didn't wait for a miracle.
They acted.
They acted.
They made the miracles happen.
Yes.
Right. Like the people who worked on the vaccine.
Well, so did the Maccabees, right?
Right.
They made the miracle happen.
Right. When, you know, the rabbis teach in the Talmud, ein somchen al hanes. We don't rely on a miracle, right? You don't say, I don't have to look when I cross the street. I won't get hit by a bus because God will make a miracle. You don't do that, right? And you don't get sick on purpose thinking that God will make a miracle. But to be aware of miracles because they're always there. I mean, you know, that's what I liked about that video. There were the people who put up signs. I know one talked about the miracle baby and one talked about that their heart stopped for breathing for 10 minutes. I mean, these are not people who relied on these miracles. They did what, you know, they went forward, but there's miracles around us all the time. I think that's also part of the Hanukkah story. We're not always, you can't always be looking for the Red Sea to split, right? Because that's a once in a Torah event, right? That doesn't happen. But the idea of waking up every day, or seeing every day, or your heart beats every day, or when you're going to the bathroom, we say brachot all day long. We say a bracha when we eat something, right? For the miracle of food. We say bracha when we go to the bathroom, for the miracle of the fact that our body's working properly. We say bracha on everything. We give thanks for these little miracles that happen every day. Any other questions or thoughts, or any other miracles that someone wanted to share?
Could I say something? First of all, I agree with Barbara 100% as far as appreciating living as long as we can now, and how our lives have been miraculously almost extended just over the past few years, really the past 20 or 30 years. And also, I appreciate very much your beautiful metaphors. I think they are wonderful. And when I was a child in religious school, I learned all these stories about the lights and everything. But when I got older and I studied a little more about what really happened, I learned that the story of the lights was completely made up. The fight was really a civil war. The Greeks were involved, but it was a civil war between the religious Jews, led by the group of the Maccabees, and the other people. So it wasn't as much black and white as it was portrayed. So that's there. I still like Hanukkah candles, and I like the idea of using it as a metaphor, but to accept it as having really happened when it didn't, I have a problem with that a little bit. But as I said, the idea of believing in miracles, but still acting and doing the best that you can, I think is important. But I think that's problematic, and I think people should be aware of the fact that this was not the way it was portrayed when we were in religious school as children.
Thank you for that. I think that's why the rabbis tried to give it some meaning in the Talmud. Maybe that's, that's why they spend so much time deliberating on what to do with Hanukkah, because they were trying to figure out what to do with this military victory.
But I love your metaphors. I heard the first two, the strong into the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few, and bringing light into the world. But the idea of that your third miracle I hadn't heard before, and I want to thank you for that, because that's really beautiful. Going ahead and acting, even though you don't think, it's going to, according to appearances, it's not going to do any good for tomorrow, but just act for today. Do the best you can for every day. And I think that is a really wonderful philosophy.
Thank you. I'm glad that spoke to you. Thank you for sharing that, Sandy. Anyone else have any thoughts they want to share?
I have a comment.
Yes.
It's Bert Taffin. The rabbis recently have played down the miracle of the lights. They've said there's no authority to say that. And they're saying that the miracle was not that. The miracle was the value, the victory in battle of the few.
We just said that.
Okay. But really, they played down the what they call the miracle of the lights.
I just read today a very interesting article by Yitz Greenberg in the Hadar. You can pick it up if you go to the Hadar website, in which he gives a complete history of the whole the whole Maccabee story. And of course, there is no
Lights.
mention of the lights in there because, as Sandy pointed out, it didn't really happen that way. But the rabbis found a value in it, and they put it in the Talmud, and they spent a lot of time worrying about it.
They wanted to find a way. If you just have another battle, I mean, that's the book of Shoftim, right? Just another battle. They were trying to say they were trying to reimagine it. They took the military victory and how could they reimagine it into something that the people could find meaning for in their day. Rabbis are still doing that today, taking the old stuff, trying to find a way to reimagine it and make it meaningful for today. Thank you for sharing that, Bert. I appreciate that perspective. Anyone else want to say anything? No. Okay, good. Yes, Bob, you want to say something?
Yeah, Rabbi, just amplifying on this idea of the miracles of medical science in our own congregation. Rachel Biala, a congregant, needed a kidney, and the wonders of medical science to be able to go through a process of having a kidney from a donor transplanted. But then the second miracle was the outreach kind of led by Rabbi Mishkin to make people aware of the need and ultimately find a donor. And so seems to me that was the second miracle there.
Thank you for that. Right. I think that's what Rabbi Olitsky was talking about when he said, be the shamash, be the one that reaches out to bring the light, whatever that means. Doesn't have to mean physical light, but be the one that reaches out to spread hope and help. Beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else? You just unmute yourself. Okay. So that I really appreciated being able to share some of this with you. Like I said, I think this idea of the third miracle of the resilience and being able to push forward, it really resonated with me in a way that the other two miracles, of course, the military victory and the miracle of the lights. Although I did like what the Kedushat Levi said. I like the idea of being able to take something that happened 2,000 years ago and metaphorically bring it into our lives today, just like the light. So my prayer for each of us is that we realize that we've been given the miracles of resilience and the miracle of inner strength. It's one of the many gifts that God gives to us every single day. And I guess when we think that we can't take one more step, or we can't suffer one more loss, or we can't survive one more challenge, or we can't make it through one more month isolated from our loved ones, the miracle of Hanukkah tells us otherwise. The lights remind us that there is strength and there is hope, and there's even the miracle of a vaccine, and may we all be able to get the vaccine soon. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Thank you for studying this.
Rabbi.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. Sorry, I really appreciate that everyone's input.
Thank you.
Thank you, Irene and Hilton. Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy
Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Chag Sameach,
Thank you.
everybody.
Chag Sameach. Happy Hanukkah.
Bye.
Thank you, Sharyn.
Thank you, Louis. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
See ya.
And I see Mom is there, but I don't see her.
I didn't see her either.
Her name
I
is.
saw her name
But she-
next to Bernadette.
Yeah. But I don't see
So I
her.
don't know, I hope she was able to see and hear you.
I did record it. I forgot right at the beginning, but I did record it. So
Okay. All right, you did an excellent
It
job.
was wonderful.
thank you.
Yeah, we lost you for about 5 or 8 minutes, I don't know why.
Oh, you lost the
Okay, just-
connection.
Lost the connection, tried to connect back, and then I rebooted the whole computer, and then it came back on. And in between, Bert sent me the FaceTime, so I caught some more of it. So it was good.
Oh, good. Hi, Beverly. Are you in Florida or is that just a snazzy Florida background? You're muted, Beverly. I don't hear you.
Well, it's a nice Florida
Was
background.
a
She's
lot
not
to
there.
think about, and I appreciate all your thoughts. It was really wonderful.
Thank you. Are you in Florida or is that just a picture?
Oh, that's my picture.
Oh, my brother is in Florida, but he doesn't look like he's in Florida. You look like you're in Florida.
I don't know how I got this background. Like, I guess like Joan has the wall.
Right.
So I don't know how she got that, and I don't know how I got this, but it was there and I took it.
Your mom is still there.
I wish you could, Bernadette, can you put my mom's video on so we can see her? She's been on the whole time without the video.
Oh dear.
Anyway, I did tape it. We'll see what happens. All right, I'm going to end it for now. All right, happy Hanukkah.
Happy
Happy
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah.
Bye, thanks for joining.
Right.
Okay.